Your food safety plan is a living document, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And that implies one very critical thing, that you should be constantly assessing the efficacy and robustness of your food safety plan um, through what I call corrective actions.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Fit Science Podcast Show. My name is Wilmer Pacheco, and I'm your host today. And today I have the pleasure to talk with a good colleague, a good friend, with Jared. Hello, Jared. How are you doing?
I'm well, Wilmer. How are you?
Everything is good. Cold here in Alabama, but I imagine that it's not as cold as where you are. I think Indianapolis, right?
Well, yeah, I'm currently in Wichita, Kansas. I've rented an apartment for one of my businesses. I'm spending some time out here driving sales for this year. So I guess you can say I've got two houses right now. And right now I'm enjoying my time in sunny Wichita.
That's good. First, Jared, could you, for our audience, could you just tell us a little bit more about your professional experience and maybe what you are doing right now?
Yeah, so obviously I went to the Kansas State, probably one of the finest, most premier organizations, universities in the world. Anyway, I digress. I studied under Keith Benke for both bachelor's and master's. I spent some time at Purina in process research. And then I got into the world of vitamins and premixes with, at the time, would have been Roche, and now it's transformed into DSM, obviously. And I did some time in the liquid feed business and learned that business out in Garden City, Kansas. And then I had the opportunity to go to Elanco, and probably one of the more enjoyable stints I've had in my career, in the fact that I got to work with customers in 23 countries around the globe. So, and then in 21, I decided I'm done with the corporate world for a bit, and I went out and I have my own consulting practice, and then I also have a small premix manufacturing company with 4 other partners. So this will be year 4 for the businesses, and I've really enjoyed it, Wilmer, in the sense that starting your own business is it's a whole nother layer of experiences, challenges, and just generally learnings. I think with the form that I filled out yesterday, I come at this. The one question, what are you an expert in? Well, I can tell you, after running your own business, I'm not an expert in anything. So I'm learning every day. So in conclusion, I'm kind of hoping I'm applying for the head coach position over at Alabama. I don't know how that's going to go, Wilmer. We'll see. I could be your neighbor.
Eastman serves veterinarians and nutritionists in agrochemical and animal health industries by helping them select, evaluate, and implement innovative nutritional programs. Eastman works with your team to customize your gut health approach in feed and water. Eastman's approach addresses nutritional and bacterial challenges and finds new ingredient preservation and hygiene solutions. Explore ways to accelerate and innovate your programs. Contact the animal nutrition team at eastman.com.
That would be great, Jared. I mean, it will be good, and I'm sure that Alabama is warmer than Wichita, probably too.
Yeah, it was terribly cold here this last week. I mean, it got down to 10 below one night. It was terrible. So, yeah. But hey, that's life, right?
But I know you got a lot of experience in the feed industry, Jared, and something that probably is important for our audience is to maybe get your thoughts on what do you think are the main opportunities and challenges that you see in the feed industry today and also in future years?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, I would say if it should be on everyone's mind, and I think it is, it's this regulatory environment. Especially in the last 3 years, we've seen a significant increase in regulatory activity. I do see some concerning things on the horizon. I've been reading a bit that FDA wants to now make all feed ingredients go through the dossier process, similar to what we see in the EU, which is going to put a significant encumbrance upon the industry, especially when you have professional nutritionists such as yourself that can make these decisions. And now everything has to go through the lens of the FDA. I mean, it's a significant problem. I hope this doesn't come through. But I also see this problem rolling into the feed mills. And some of the people I work with, I know a good portion of them, they just don't have the technical expertise to manage some of this increasing regulatory concern, especially when it comes to FSMA. So that is a concern. I think parallel, I think the low margins that we see right now across the industry, it's not helping matters. I mean, obviously, reinvestment back into the business from a capital expenditure, for sure, right now would be something that I would probably question. And then the second thing is that this goes back to the regulatory thing, Wilmer, that to have people on staff to do this increased regulatory burden requires margins. A business isn't a not-for-profit. If you're not making money, why are you in business? And so this is a real concern that I see, and I do see some excess capacity going to have to be drained from the industry if we don't fix this low margin problem.
Yeah, and I mean you are touching a really good important topic, which is FSMA. And I know like you had the opportunity to visit several feed mills. How do you see them? Because right now they have to be in compliance with good manufacturing practices, and also they really need to have a food safety plan in place, right? What will be your advice for them when they are writing those food safety plans, or what changes they need to do, with in their food safety plans?
So right now I see a pretty clear line of demarcation with the food safety plans. The big companies, they have all the resources for the food safety plans. And okay, let's start at the fundamentals. There's a general sense within these food safety plans that once I write a food safety plan, I can put it on the shelf, and I put 3 years down on my food safety plan, and then I go back and look at it and say, well, I don't need to change much. Okay, so there's this 3-year deadline thing that hangs out there. The problem is that that's not what the regulations read. The regulations require that your food safety plan is a living document, okay? Mm-hmm. And that implies one very critical thing, that you should be constantly assessing the efficacy and robustness of your food safety plan through what I call corrective actions, okay? Mm-hmm. So if I look at some of the big entities, I'd say the multinational conglomerates, they have a whole staff of people whose job is to go around and put together corrective actions, and then the people in the plants are the ones that have to implement the corrective actions. And there's always this cycle of assessing, analyzing, correcting, and then reviewing, okay? But then again, let's go back to these small entities. They don't have the resources for this. They don't understand what it means to have a corrective action. And so all they're focused in on is making money because they have to keep the doors open. So this is going to become a real problem. And it's really going to kind of sharpen as I see another trend that's coming. For years, third-party certification was really the domain of the premix companies, of the ingredient suppliers. So, if I was going to buy, say, chelated minerals from Zinpro, right? Then as a quality person or as a nutritionist, that SQF or FAMI QS certification, that third party certification, meant something to me. The premix companies have had to adopt this third party certification. And obviously, me coming out of DSM, they've got one of the finest quality systems in the world, and it's FAMI QS. So, but now this third party certification, it's rolling over to the feed mills. And so now you have this extra layer of regulatory concern where some of these feed mills, they don't even understand how a food safety plan works. Now they're going to have third-party certification by some of these outside agencies like SQF or whatever. They're not ready. That they're just not. They don't have the tools to deal with this. Does that make sense, Wilmer?
Yeah, and what I'm thinking too is like, as you were saying, like this is a living document, right? And let's say if you got like a commercial feed mill, and then they are making a new, like a new product, or they are using new ingredients, or like the area where they are sourcing the ingredients, they might be like a higher prevalence of mycotoxins, for example. Then they need to take all that into considerations to make changes, in the food safety planning and in the hazard analysis. So yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about the mycotoxins for a minute, okay?
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a key focus for FDA and for the state regulatory agencies. Interestingly enough, if you read the regulations, if you follow the way a food safety plan should work, is if you analyze your data, if you collect your data and you analyze it, you don't need to measure aflatoxin in every truck if there's not a perceived risk, as long as you assess it and manage the risk. But there again, we get into this mindset that, well, I guess I have to test every truck for aflatoxin. Nobody looks at the data. So you have reams of data that nobody's looking at, and they really don't know what the risk is. So, let me ask you a question. In northern Illinois, what's your concern? Is it aflatoxin? What's your concern, Wilmer? It's probably not aflatoxin, right?
I mean, for me, typically when I see the meals, I'm always gonna check, DON at least and aflatoxin if we are in poultry feed mills. But like, if you are like producing, let's say feed for swine, then you gotta pay attention to the Sierra Leone. But as you're saying, I mean, depending on where we are getting the grains, right? We need to see what are the prevalence there and then focus on that. Maybe this year we are going to be paying more attention to aflatoxin. Next year we are going to be paying attention to another mycotoxin, depending on the prevalence.
So if you go look in the regulations, right, there's always this discussion about a food safety team, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And therein is another problem is that, and I have to give a shout out to DSM. Their approach, they were ahead of the game on this when FSMA was published or brought into the real world. And their teams, their cross-functional teams, that they cover quality, production, technical, or as far as nutrition, purchasing is involved. Should purchasing be involved in your food safety plan, Wilmer? What do you think?
I think it's important. It's important because, you might get an ingredient that could be cheaper but higher risk, for example.
Exactly.
But I think everybody needs to get involved, not only in the food safety plan, but also, in all the layers of a company, when they take decisions, in order to maintain the company profitable.
Exactly. And let's go a step deeper. Purchasing buys products according to standards that are set. and by price.
Mhm.
That's how they buy it. Okay.
Mhm.
So if you don't communicate that with this data set, that this particular vendor of corn poses a risk for aflatoxin, well, how is purchasing supposed to know? They should be
Mhm.
involved in these discussions as well as anybody else.
And something that just came to my mind also, Jared, is like, and I think this is important for all the feed mills too, is to have like ingredient definitions for all the ingredients that they use. And within those ingredient definitions, they can put like basics for rejection. And that's, then in the basic for rejection, they can include what will be the maximum levels of aflatoxin that they will accept, or DON, or what will be the maximum level of fiber. So you can put like some safety layer there, but also some nutritional layers. What will be the maximum of moisture, or what will be the minimum of protein, et cetera, et cetera. So that might be like a good way where they can start to just having good ingredient definitions that, like the people buying the ingredients understand what are the expectations.
That is a really good point, Wilmer, and I think too that that's another area that's going to need some shoring up, in the sense that when you do your risk assessment for, say, aflatoxins, you can't just assess the risk one dimensionally and say, okay, I've got an average of 20 parts per billion
Billion.
with a standard deviation. No, you have to actually look at the inclusion of that ingredient within a diet to assess what the harm or the potential harm is to the animal. Okay. And so I don't, obviously right now I don't work with a lot of the integrators, but I do work with commercial feed mills, and we look at a broad spectrum package. We look at a swine ration, a poultry ration, a layer ration, dairy, and beef. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
each of those species has a varying degree of tolerance to aflatoxins, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Now,
correct. Yeah.
your point about the nutritional thing, okay, that's another challenge that right now I'm working through with some clients, in the sense that they should be analyzing their ingredient draws, okay, that come through the
Mm-hmm.
batching system. And Wilmer, how many times when you were a feed mill manager, did you turn, you came off shift and you're like, okay, I've got all these formulas that I manufactured. You didn't really analyze it. You just looked for any glaring problems and you signed off on the ticket, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you are formulating or when you are at the feed mill, you are mainly paying attention to make sure that you don't have like the variances, right? That the variances are within the levels that you already defined. But you're right. I mean, once that you are in the feed mill, you are not looking, what is the protein content of a specific diet leaving the mixer, right? Because you are expecting that was considered um, when you got the ingredients and you analyze the ingredients. But one of my point there is, Jared, is that even when you are analyzing the ingredients, you don't need to analyze them the same, like don't have like a completely quality control where you are going to say, well, I'm going to be analyzing corn every day, in a composite sample, or soybean meal every day. From a composite sample, because you might have ingredients that are more variable than others. And then if you got ingredients that are more variable in composition, then you need to analyze them more often.
I agree with you 100%.
The less variable.
And again, so let's dial this back a little bit to FSMA. What does FSMA tell us that we're required to do? We are required to prevent a hazard. Now, it can be a physical hazard, right? It could be a chemical hazard, but also it could be a nutritional hazard, correct? So let's dial in a little bit to the poultry side. If your live production guys are telling you that you've got wet litter out there, well, that's a problem for FSMA, right? Because you've affected the nutritional health of that animal, and that has to be dealt with. So continuously sending out
Mm-hmm.
feed that has a bad level or an improper level of sodium, which causes wet litter, guess what? You need to assess the risk, look at the data,
Mm-hmm.
put a corrective action together, and fix the problem.
Yeah, and like something that is nice with FISMA too is that when you look those hazards, you can, if you get because something that we haven't discussed are like good manufacturing practices, right? Which is one of the prerequisites programs. So the good thing is like you can identify these hazards, and then you can control those hazards or just reduce, the probability or the severity, having good manufacturing practices. So maybe like analyzing mixing uniformity or analyzing the levels of salt, which is a good manufacturing practice, can help to prevent that hazard. But something that ones that comes to my mind right now, Jared, is copper.
Yeah.
Like toxicity, because when you look the poultry diets, we use more copper, probably pigs also. I think we can use maybe like up to 125 ppms. But if you have a commercial feed mill and you are also producing feed for sheep, then that's an issue, because they are going to be prone to copper toxicity if you don't wash, the way that you are washing and mixing those feeds, or even the way that you are doing probably the sequencing when you are producing those feeds.
Okay, that's a really good point. And you know what? Let's
Yeah.
go a step further, because this is one that nobody is looking at. My favorite molecule in the world is 25 hydroxy D3. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If I could eat 25 hydroxy D3, I would eat it every day. The problem is in humans, horses, correct? It causes calcification of soft tissue. Dogs, it does it to dogs.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a commercial feed mill and you're manufacturing horse feed and you've got 25 hydroxy D3 in there, that's a risk, right? It's not like Rumensin, but it's a potential risk.
That's what I was going to say, or monensin, right? If you are have a commercial feed mill and then you are producing feed for chicken and horses, then you got to pay attention to that monensin.
Yeah, exactly. So if I'm making chicken feed and I think, well, I don't have any monensin in the chicken feed, I can go ahead and run it, and it's got 25 hydroxy D3 in there. And then you make horse feed immediately after. That's a risk. That's a significant risk for horses.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I think their tolerance is in the part per trillion range, correct?
I don't remember the number right now, but they are very susceptible. Yeah.
Very sensitive to that molecule.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing that maybe just to expand on this topic, Jared, what do you think that the companies can do? Because some of the challenges that myself I see is like a lot of employee turnover, and then you always get like the new employees that they need to be retrained, with this, not only with the FISMA, but also with other rules in the feed industry. So what do you think that the companies can do to train the employees?
Yeah, I mean, this is really the age old problem, especially within the feed industry, because obviously the pool of people that would work in a dirty feed mill, it's not the same caliber of people that are going to work at say an automotive plant. Okay. However, that being said, it comes down to culture, Wilmer. Okay. If my feed mill is filthy and it looks like a shithole, that's the employee that I'm going to attract. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about the benefits. It's not about the pay. At the end of the day, go into the break room. Go into the break room of your facility. If that is a rat infested break room with bugs and cockroaches and stuff like that. Well, do you want to work in there, Mr. Manager? I don't want to work in there.
Mm-hmm.
So it comes down to that culture. If you can change your culture, if you take pride in your facility, which is part of FSMA, which is part of OSHA, and you keep your facility clean and you keep things well maintained, you can now attract a group of people that want to work there. Okay? And when they want to work there, they'll stay there. And now your problem of the revolving door begins to go away. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I fully agree with that, Jared, because I used, when I was working in the feed mill in North Carolina, what I will tell the employees is like, like sometimes you spend more time in the feed mill than at home, particularly if you are working like 12 hours per shift. So it is really good to create this culture of, keeping, the area clean. And also the other thing that you mentioned about the maintenance, because maintenance is extremely important. If you got like too many leaks to fix, then the feed mill is going to be dirty. And you are going to have higher risk, not only from FSMA, but also from OSHA, right? So
Correct.
I think you are bringing a good point there on the importance of housekeeping and a good preventive and corrective maintenance program.
Exactly. Look, it's not that hard to clean the floor. And I understand that we have aging facilities in this industry, but they're also our facilities. And, when I've traveled overseas, especially in Latin America, I tell you, there's some pretty outstanding facilities in Latin America. And they're not fancy, but they're clean and they're well maintained. And that's a culture in Latin America that I specifically enjoy to see that. Okay. Because, and I wish the United States, we would start looking at doing more of that. Now, there are good facilities out there. I work with some good facilities that keep their facilities clean and well maintained. But I also work with others that they need to spend more time doing that.
Yeah, no, and I think you're bringing a good point, and maybe, from the university side, we probably need to do more, training people in the smaller facilities, because, sometimes they got a lot of different issues, and then they need to focus on, okay, if I'm not doing this, what is the risk, right? That way they can focus on the most important things, I think.
Here's an idea for the managers. All right. How about the managers go out and pick up a broom and go sweep? How about the managers show the employees that they care about their facility? Okay. And I know that there's good managers out there, but I also know quite a few managers that like to ride a desk. Okay. So that facility is a reflection of you as a manager. Get out, go clean the floor with your people and lead them from the bottom up. And then the culture will change.
Well, and I use that analogy a lot, Jared, because I go like to some fitness in Latin America too. And where I see that sometimes they have a challenge, and I don't know if you have seen it too, but it's like with the grain sweepers to clean the silos. And I always tell them, if you want to fix, the grain sweepers, you need to get into the bin with the people that is cleaning. And once that it becomes your problem, then you are going to fix it, because sometimes it's because like the screws don't work, or, there are so many different issues. I think, as you're saying, it is good for the managers to go around the facility, and also sometimes they get more used to like how does the facility sounds in different areas, right? So they might have like an air leak one day, or they might have like a steam leak. So as they go and maybe cleaning the facility or just walking around, then they can find other problems, and that helps out to improve the productivity of that facility.
It does. It does. And
Yeah.
now you're creating a culture, and this just goes right back to the very beginning. where you're creating a culture of assessing your risk, assessing your situation, putting together corrective actions, and implementing those corrective actions. And it all starts with the manager. That's who it starts with.
And, just another topic that I would like to discuss with you, Jared, I mean, because you got a lot of experience. Have you seen, opportunities, in the feed industry to maybe especially improve pellet quality, right? Because, pellet quality influences the growth performance, or maybe some opportunities that you have seen in batching and mixing?
Well, so let's talk a little bit about pellet quality. So I've seen some positive developments in the last 5 to 6 years. I think that there's been a body of work. I've done a little bit of stuff. You've done quite a bit. I think, what's the fellow out of West Virginia?
Joe Moritz.
Joe Moritz has done some really good stuff. The industry is beginning to understand the concept of steam. Okay. It's starting to understand the concept of conditioning. So as I've been around, I see that we're no longer sitting so much dogmatically. We're not sitting so dogmatically on a temperature like 185. We still have that problem, but I see the industry beginning to understand that conditioning is about making a good pellet. So I am encouraged. I do see that we're caring a bit more about that. I think I look at it a little differently the older I get, and I'm going to talk about integrated for a moment. The chicken is our customer, okay? And the pig is our customer. I mean, we still have customers, and that customer is going to tell us how good of a job we do with pellet quality through growth performance. That's how it works. And so, I'm positively encouraged along those lines. Mixed uniformity. So I'm probably a little different. I over the years, I don't get hung up on this 10% and lower CV crap. I mean, obviously, we need to do a good job mixing, but I think that 10% or less CV thing has become dogmatic, and I don't know if it's achievable, to be honest with you. I think the number should be moved to 15%, is what I think.
Yeah, what I have seen, Jared, from my site in regarding mixing, typically what I see is the problems typically don't happen in the mixer. If you got the mixer is good, and then the RPMs, I look a lot the RPMs right now, because I have seen some feed mills that have 20 to 22 RPMs, not here in the US, but in Latin America. What I have seen typically is they should be more from 33 to 37 RPMs. And I have the feeling if the condition of the mixer is good, and then the RPMs are good, when you see problems with mixer uniformity, they are not occurring in the mixer. They are occurring somewhere else. Maybe you have a gate that is leaking into the mixer, or you maybe have the mixer that is not opening or closing correctly. So that's something that, or maybe they are not adding ingredients in the correct order, et cetera, right? So yeah, and the other thing is it depends on how many grams the animal is consuming. For me, it will be very important, if you are feeding a day-old chick, to have a good uniformity feed, right? Because they are only going to be consuming 10 grams to 12 grams the first night. So you got to make sure that you get everything there. Older animals, maybe like pigs, that they are consuming more than a kilogram. I don't remember. But if you got some differences in mixer uniformity, then you can correct those, or the animal will correct those differences with a higher feed intake.
That's why I don't like that 10%. That being said, I think I do like your comment on the revolutions, the RPM. And if you go back in literature, Some of the earliest work, good work, done by Harry Post out of Kansas State back in the 60s. That's 1960s, Wilmer, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
They focused on the absolute number of revolutions for the mix.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I do think that that's kind of been lost in the industry. Again, we focused on mix times and efficiencies, but yeah, that's an area that I wouldn't be afraid to look at again.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, another endemic problem that I still fight, and I cannot believe it. After all of these years, there are still feed mills that do not understand the concept of dry mix versus a wet mix. They put
Hmm.
everything in, including their liquids, turn the mixer on for 2 minutes, and then there you go. So then all of a sudden, we've got wet litter in the house. Okay. We've got
Yeah.
terrible efficiency again. I mean, and then pretty soon people are saying, what's going on? Well, I don't know. I'm mixing it for 2 minutes. Well, that's true,
Hmm.
but you're mixing everything together. And mixing theory, and this goes back to Harry Post stuff, you cannot, once you put that liquid in that mixer, the distribution of dry ingredients stops. It is, you get lumping, you get caking, it's over. So that is an area that I do still think is an opportunity because it happens more than we want to let know.
Well, and you know what is I would say the funny thing about this is that it's really easy to correct because a lot of the feed mills are doing all the batching and mixing using an automation system. And then you can easily make those changes, in the automation system. So you can ask, well, all the dry ingredients enter, then at least 30 seconds, depending on the type of the mixer, dry cycle, then you apply your liquids, right? So some of these things are very easy to change and don't cause anything to a feed mill.
That is an interesting point because actually it's a far bigger concern than what we let on. Because let's
Mhm.
say we have a feed mill that's putting all the ingredients in, including the liquids, and they're mixing for 2 minutes. Okay. So then I show up and I say, no, you can't do that. You have to have 2 minutes dry mix or a minute dry mix and a
For a
two
minute.
minute wet mix. So I've now increased their batch cycle by 30%, okay? Or 25%,
Mhm.
whatever the number is.
Mhm.
Well, if I'm running 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, I've now added the amount of time for the same amount of feed. I now go to 7 days a week,
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
now we're at a situation where I'm paying more overtime, okay? And I don't know, to be honest with you, when you start to push a facility, most of these big integrators are probably running at what, 85, 87%
Mhm.
capacity? And now all of a sudden you add on 25% time requirement, they can't do
Yeah.
it.
No, but like what I see typically, Jared, is that the facilities that are pelleting feed, the batching system shouldn't be the bottleneck. The bottleneck should be pelleting, right? And
Yeah.
that's they need to go and look, where are the bottlenecks, and maybe there are gonna be some facilities as you described that cannot do it. But there are going to be others that could easily maybe like do 30 seconds of dry cycle and then 90 seconds of wet cycle and end up in 2 minutes, but with better mixer uniformity. The other thing that I think sometimes we forget, Jared, is that the most expensive is the feed ingredients. So, like, let's imagine that if we are mixing a diet that a ton costs $500 and we don't mix it well, we are potentially losing a lot of dollars there.
Oh,
Yeah,
terrible.
I
Absolutely
always
terrible.
I always like to make like my calculation, and if you got like one of the biggest feed mill in the U.S., they are gonna be making 25,000 tons per week. If you multiply that by $500 per ton, just making it easier, that feed mill runs about $12 million in ingredients in 1 week. in a year is more than it's like 600 millions. So sometimes that's what I like this, like the processing, because you can make a small change, and then you, even if the improvement is like in pennies, it's a lot of money at the end of the year for a company.
It is. And, I had this
Hmm.
picture years ago. This came from Roche, and I always love this picture. Did you know that the amount of biotin, of pure D biotin, that a sow consumes in the course of a year, okay, to meet their nutritional requirement, will fit on your thumb?
Hmm.
Okay, so let that
Yeah.
sink in to your point, Wilmer. That's the amount of biotin for that sow for 300 over a 365-day period. And we don't pay attention to what we're mixing. It's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, because it's a lot of money. I mean, we are dumping a lot of money into the mixer, every few minutes, and we just, if we didn't mix it well, then some of that money is lost. My concern sometimes is that typically you don't see like an increase in mortality, but you see like a poor feed efficiency, and that's more difficult to measure.
It is more difficult to measure, but then again, that also falls under the FSMA regulations. We're back to FSMA
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
if you feed an animal a substandard diet and it affects performance, obviously it's not a recall event, but it still requires an investigation.
It's time for our famous three. Evonik Animal Nutrition is committed to ensure food security and safety while reducing the ecological footprint of animal farming. Its products and services use evidence-based solutions that seek to promote animal welfare and reduce reliance on natural resources. All this is underpinned by long-standing industry partnerships and deep customer understanding. Evonik's focus on efficiency, sustainable, healthy nutrition, and collaborations with livestock farming partners creates value for customers and consumers.
Well, like Jared, I think I could speak with you the whole day, but I mean, we have been 40 minutes already. So I would like to, just I have had the opportunity to have you here in Auburn when you were with Elanco and doing some research project, and my students always enjoy, interacting with you. They always remember you. So maybe, what I would like to do just to finish the talk is like just to get some advice that you can provide, for graduate students, maybe undergrads that might be listening to the podcast, and how they can get prepared better to work in the industry or academia.
Two things, and it really kind of depends on where they want to go in the industry.
Hmm.
Number one, if you're going to go into feed mill management, fine. Go work as an employee. You go get into that bin, like you just said. You go clean that floor, or where you have to clean out the tunnel. Okay. I did an investigation on a dust explosion here a few years ago, and fatalities. They almost lost two employees. The employees, we found out, went into this tunnel every night to clean out the grain that had come out of the bottom of the conveyor that nobody wanted to fix. These kids should go clean that tunnel. And you clean a tunnel a couple of times, that'll be the last time that you let that place turn into a hellhole. Okay. If you're going to go into the allied industries, okay, which I see from what I see right now, the feed people, about half of them go allied industry, the other half go into the feed mills. You need to go sell a product. You need to go out and you need to deal with customers and understand what customers' needs are and learn the industry from that side. That is what I see as the two things that should be understood by these kids coming out.
Yeah, and I need to, just give you like something that is important because you did mention it. Go to every place in the feed mill, but also it's very important to spend time with the maintenance people. Every time that they go and change screens, go to change hammers, go and change pellet dies, or if there is a plug somewhere in the feed mill, go and understand what is going on. That way they understand how the facility works, right? And they will be able to solve problems. No, not in a month after being in the facility, but maybe 1 or 2 years after being in the facility, they should be able to solve, the issues that arise.
The first guy that really trained me in industry was a guy named Keith Pike, and I think he's retired now. He was a K-Stater, worked at Purina / Land O'Lakes his whole career. He's a good man. My first 6 months, he made me work with the maintenance people in facilities all over the Purina system. And I learned so much. That's great advice. Go work with the maintenance guys, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that know that plant better than anybody.
Yeah. Well, Jared, thank you for accepting, participating in this podcast. And it's always a pleasure to speak with you and share ideas.
Absolutely, Wilmer. And listen, when I get hired on at Bama to lead that football team, there will always be tickets for you and your family at that game.
That sounds good. Thank you, Jared. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care, Wilmer.
Thank you. Take care.